Spark plug's on, fuel's in, fuel's connected, oil's in. Been procrastinating a little bit with the rebuild on the Himalayan engine, so going to get cracking with it. First thing we're doing is popping the crankshaft back in, just giving everything a light oil, the bearing and the crank itself, the crankcase. It's a light interference fit there. Now what we need to do is line up this little dot mark here with the front of the engine and the web of the crank at its lowest position, and we line that up with the little dot mark here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 valleys. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 peaks. That seems to be correct. Success. Okay, so the crankshaft is in and the counterbalance shaft is in, and what I've done there is lined up that little dot mark with that dot mark, and that I assume means that they're doing what they should do in relation to each other, and should always match up. That's what the book says. I'm using Loctite 518. The book recommends Loctite 5699. I've done a bit of research. I'm hoping this will be alright. Okay, there we are. All the surfaces are coated in the Loctite gasket maker, and now we lower the right hand half of the crankcase onto the left hand side. Okay, so I've flipped it over. I'm a big believer in not putting a bolt in dry, so although it doesn't say anything about Loctite or anti-seize or anything, I'm going to put some anti-seize on each of these. So that's bolt number 1. The book's actually pretty specific. It's got the diameter, the length, and even the socket size of the head required. Yeah, so as I was saying, the book's quite detailed. It gives you all the sizes of the bolts, M8 by 100, and then it also gives you the torque measurements in the boxes next to all of them. I'm assuming, it doesn't say anywhere, but I'm assuming that you tighten them in that order. So the first one we're going to do is the hex Allen key up to 20 to 24 nut measurements. Luckily my torque adapter's got nut measurements on it, so that's good. .22, that's right in between 20 and 24 if I remember correctly from my maths days, so we'll go with that. Doesn't feel very tight at all, but that's what the book says. All torqued down. Continuing with the reassembly of the Himalayan. This is the new clutch kit from Hitchcock's in the UK. It's got much meatier pads on the clutch, on the friction plates, and the steel plates are used from the original. Just going to give these all a soak in oil before we put them in. So just a bit of a comparison here. Here's my steel plates, the original steel plates that I'm pretty sure I cooked. That's one of the original friction plate. You can see the size of the little pads in comparison to the new ones from Hitchcock here. Quite a lot more surface area. Here we go, assembling the clutch assembly for the Himalayan. Popping in the two little steel compression springs there. heard a little clinking noise as I was putting the one of the gear shaft ends on. Turned things and I heard this little clink, and I was a bit concerned. I was going to, if you can just see it just down in here, there's a little thrust washer come off at the end of the blue pointer there. I think it's probably come off of here. So get a little magnet out and dig that out. Take two, putting the case back together after hearing a little tinkling noise as I was turning the gear shafts. I stripped the engine again because this little washer here had come off at some point, a little thrust washer. It did get marked on this side by one of the gears, so after a bit of research I was a bit concerned about putting it back in, but I was a bit concerned that there was a coating on there, but it appears that that black coating is really just an oxidization from the heat treating process. So yeah, I've just hit it with some 800 grit wet and dry just to get rid of the little mark that was on it and make sure it's nice and smooth, and just recoated all the mating surfaces with the Loctite 518, and just going to put the two cases back together now. And what happened last time is that I'd done a dry fit to make sure that it all went together nicely, and as I've taken it apart from the dry fit, that little washer is lifted away with the case, and later dropped into the case without me knowing, amongst the gears. The oil drive gear sprocket also has a thrust washer on either side, so make sure they don't drop into the engine. Didn't quite assemble this correctly. The first row of plates is supposed to be offset to the rest of them to engage in this first little lip here where the rest of them go down there. So I'm just going to pull that apart and redo it. I'd forgotten I'd stop recording there for a bit, but the clutch assembly's nearly back in. I'm just going to put some rag around here just in case something goes ping. Don't want anything disappearing down inside the engine now. Ten to 12 on these again. Wait for it to stop flashing. So this is the crankshaft nut on the right hand side. It's a left hand thread, M24, and it goes up to 85 to 90 nut measurements. And I've just got the timber dowel going through the conrod small end. Ooh, gonna need a bit more leverage on that, I think. Gonna get a little bit more leverage on the crankshaft nut on the right hand side of the crankcase. Just a little tip for extending your breaker bar. Extension socket is quite a good size fit to go onto your breaker bar, and it gives you a nice bit of extra leverage there. You do just need to be able to brace against it on the engine though. Make sure my torque meter's still operating. Spin it around a bit. Try that way. There we go. What did we get to? Just over 90. This is just a little fingerboard here to help install the piston onto the conrod there. So that'll just sit like that, and the piston will be able to sit down onto the board there, and we'll slide the pot over the top. Just gonna add a bit of oil to the small end, a bit of oil on the gudgeon pin. Bit of oil on the piston. So you can just see a little mark in the inside of the piston there, a little arrow that indicates the front of the piston. So we want our rings at about 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock for the second one, and then the little oils you can just make out there at 6 o'clock. There's the click we were hoping for. Okay, and the manual calls for grease on the mating surfaces for the foot gasket. So I'm just going to get that oil all around the piston. Pull that out of the way for a second. Really specify what sort of grease. Got to be careful not to bung up the oil jet there at all with grease, otherwise you'll become a cropper. Have the same problem that I've just had. I'm actually installing 2 foot gaskets. It's recommended to reduce the compression a little bit because of the larger piston. There we go. I do believe it's moving down nicely. Nice. Just loosely put the magneto on just so that can give the engine a turn and make sure everything's working as it should and not make any nasty noises. So that's top dead center there. It's about where the viewing port is to see the top dead center marks, so that's good. Cam chain guides going in with a little thrust washer to go in the back there, so it's not pushing on the aluminium, and then that gets done up to 10 nut measurements. One at the front there just seats down into that little V and notches into a couple of locating divots at the top here. So the book suggests you smear a load of grease around the chain here to just hold it in position while you're doing the rest of the assembly. Here's the head back from the machinist. We just got them to cut the valve seats and reface the valves, inlet and exhaust. I'd done a little bit of tidying up there and let the grinder just slip, so they have taken a small shaving off the face here. Hopefully it doesn't cause any issues with compression. So that's going to go on next. Just popped in the locating dowels there. The gasket goes on like so. So we'll get that thread up through there. Do it with 3 hands here. Head's back on, just putting in the 4 main head bolts. There's 2 more little bolts that go on the side of the head there that are renowned for causing a bit of oil seepage between the head and the barrel, because you can't get enough torque on them, and one of the reasons is that they're a little bit short. The original one is there on the left, so I'm going to replace that with two longer bolts that are Allen key head. Give all these bearing surfaces a light coating of oil. Get a bit into the cam holes as well, won't hurt. Okay, so the engine is at top dead centre, and I've just got to get that little T mark on the top of the cam there, also at top dead centre. Oh, you idiot. So don't do it like I just did it. Try again. You need to put the cam in position. You get the chain on the cam sprocket first. How exactly are you supposed to do this? So just to run through that, the cam is at top dead centre, the engine, the piston sorry, is at top dead centre, indicated by the Woodruff key. I've checked it on the magneto as well, and yeah, the piston's right at the top of the barrel, so that should be good there. Okay, and these get done up to 10 to 12 nut measurements. And there, turn it up. Like so. Just about to put the cam tensioner body into the opening there. Before you do that, you need to remove the little bolt, O-ring and spring, and you also need to make sure that this little guide is pushed all the way in, and to do that you just push this little lever here, just give it a little push and push it all the way in. That's just a little ratchet system, so on the way out it gets locked into place, but then you can release that. This little lock here needs to be facing down when you install it. Just tightening the magneto nut onto the crankshaft. The book calls for a special tool to bolt into the bolts that hold the magneto to the starter clutch, but haven't got one of them, so I'm using a seatbelt style oil filter remover, and the book says that that's supposed to be a 19mm, but that feels a little bit loose to me. 18's a much better fit. Rocker cover's going on now, so I've applied the sealant all the way around the mating surface, a little bit thin in a couple of spots. Just doing up the head bolts now to the torque settings. I've got them all in place. They're not terribly tight, only about 12 Newton meters all up. Pretty important that you do it in the right order to get the correct tension on the head. Most of the little bits and pieces back on the engine now, so we're going to mount the engine onto the subframe, and then that gets lifted in one piece into the frame of the bike. Time to lift the motor off the workbench, so we've got the block and tackle up there. Motor's on the workbench there. Got the lifting straps in place. And we'll go from there. few things I couldn't remember how they came off. That little bar at the top there is actually sits inside the frame. A couple of other mistakes I made putting it together. There's the little gear shift indicator down there. I forgot to put the little brass thingy into the case, and that actually rides on that connection to indicate where the gear is. Got to try and remember where all the bloody pipes come off from the carby and stuff as well. A couple of them are self-explanatory. I'm not sure. There's a little breather from the bottom side of the intake there that I can't figure out, can't remember where that goes. We'll get it sorted. I'm just going to give it a crank with no spark plug in, no fuel, just to give that oil a good chance to get around before there's any explosions. The battery's slowing already. Righto, here we go. Give it some choke. Spark plugs on, fuel's in, fuel's connected, oil's in. That's odd. Too much compression. Batteries could be a little bit low. Bit long on this cable length here really, but I've got it at the moment. I've heard that the Himalayan Tools cam, which is what is in there now, is quite a noisy cam, which I think is what that tappity noise is. Just saw that the oil all disappeared out of the sight window, just wanted to make sure that it's all good there still. Let's come back down, still looks clean. Again. a bit of smoke coming out. Could be a loose exhaust. I'll put some wrap on the exhaust as another little feature. So that's a bit smoky. Might hook up a fan. There we have it, got it running. I think the battery was just a bit sad. Like I say, the smoke coming off there, that's just the exhaust wrap settling in. So I've just got this big fan going, keep everything blowing the smoke out of the shed. Give it a little rev. The bike for a bit of a longer run and came back and noticed a bit of oil sitting around the spark plug there. I think it's the rocker cover gasket. Silicone hasn't really sealed properly, so I'm just about to pull that off in the workshop, working away on the bike, and I'm being watched by a couple of kangaroos.